Okay, so today we're going to be making our DC apple maple butter. So this is a jarred product like a preserve, but it can be used as layers in dessert and all kinds of other things. So the first thing we need to do is chop up our apples. And I just wanted to show you quickly the best way to chop up an apple. Wash the apple and make sure there's no sticker on it, okay? And then I want you to cut just next to the stem as close as you can. And then pop the apple down, turn it, and then cut beside the stem again. And roll it over and cut beside the stem, and roll it over and cut beside the stem. There, we've cored our apple in only 4 cuts. It's been really quite quick. And then we're just going to chop it up into big pieces and throw it into the pot here. There we go, nice big chunks. We're going to pour our apple cider or our apple juice into the bottom of the pot just to get a little bit of steam. And we're going to throw in our cinnamon stick. Okay, so we just need half a cinnamon stick for this. Oh, I should push the handle around here. So give it a little bit of a push. And the point of this is to just sort of steam cook the apples until they turn mushy. So I'm going to do that by putting a lid on my pot, which for me is a bowl. But if you have a lid, go ahead and use a lid. And we just want it to be at a nice gentle simmer. We're going to simmer it for until they're soft. It's probably going to be about 15 or 20 minutes. You might find, depending on the apples, that it's too dry, and you might need to add another splash of juice. But try not to add so much liquid. We don't want to boil it in liquid. We just want the bottom to have a little bit of liquid so that the steam can generate and it can cook down the apples. I don't want to add an extra huge amount of liquid. So that's going to cook for about 20 minutes or so, but every 5 or 10 minutes I'm going to come by and give it a quick stir and see how it's doing. We'll check back in a couple minutes. So my apples have been cooking for about 10 minutes now, so let's take the lid off and just take a quick peek. Perfect. You can see that there's lots of moisture just from the apples on their own, but if it was looking dry, I would add a little liquid at this point. But ultimately, my goal is that we're going to push all of these apples through a strainer. So you want to make sure that they're super soft. So mine are getting there, but they're not quite ready yet. Some of them are still kind of firm. I can't mash them with my spatula. So just give it a quick push around. Pop the lid back on and let it cook a little longer. The reason we left the peel on the apple is so that it's a natural form of pectin, the peel from the apple. And so it's going to help gel our apple butter, but we're also going to use commercial pectin as well. And you'll notice that we're using sugar-free or low sugar pectin. And that's because we're not really adding a lot of sugar. So in this container, I have my honey and my maple syrup, and I'll add it all at the end once I've pushed these through a sieve. So I'm going to let these go for another 10 minutes, and then we'll take another check. So my apples have been going for another 10 minutes. Just going to take the lid off. And you can see now they're super cooked down into a nice paste, I guess. They're broken down. There's no hard bits of apple left. So now I'm just going to start pushing them through a strainer. So I'm going to take a bit at a time. And I'm just going to start working it through. So I want to remove all of the peel and just get the apple pulp and juice through. So basically I'm making applesauce. You really need to work at it to get it to go through. And once there's nothing but skin left in the strainer, I want to make sure I get all the apple. I'm just going to check the bottom of the strainer, pull off any of the applesauce that's there. I'm going to pop the skin into the compost bin, and then I'm going to move on to the next bit. So we'll come back when I've pushed it all through the strainer. Okay, so I've pushed all of our apple puree through a strainer. So we've got the nice applesauce here, and we want to make sure that we have about 500 mils. So I'm just going to pop it into a measuring cup just to see what I ended up with. I'm a tiny bit short, but that's okay. If you ended up a lot short, I would suggest that you either adjust your recipe or cook a few more apples. I've got about 450 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into a pot. And then we are going to turn on the heat just nice and low. And once it gets a little bit warmer, I'm going to whisk in my pectin. So pectin typically needs sugar and acid to activate, but remember we have a lot of natural pectin in our applesauce because we cooked it with the apple skins, and we're using the low sugar pectin because we're not adding a ton of sugar. Typically it's almost equal weight for fruit and sugar, but I don't want to add that much sugar to this apple butter because then it's going to be just too sweet. So we're going to get that warmed up. And just as it's warming, I'm just going to whisk it just a little. And then you want to whisk in your pectin. Now, normally you would add pectin to sugar and whisk those two together before you added it to the mix. But I'm not actually adding any sugar, so I just want to be super mindful that I just add a little bit at a time and make sure it gets whisked in really, really well so that I don't have any lumps of pectin. There we go. So give that a really good whisk. And now we want to bring it to a boil, which we're doing. Once it comes to a boil, I want to stir in my honey and my maple syrup. So I don't know if you can see, I have sort of a lava boil going on here. And you really want to stir this a lot to make sure you're not burning to the bottom. So the applesauce is thick and it's going to tend to cling to the bottom and burn. So I'm going to add my syrup and my honey. There we go. And now I want to stir it just gently for about 5 minutes. So this is to activate the pectin and to make sure it's going to make a nice gel. So now that's had a chance to simmer for 5 minutes, I'm just going to turn the heat off and I'm going to get ready to put it into the jars that we prepared earlier. Okay, so now I want to make sure that all of my equipment for my apple maple butter is completely sterile. So in this pot, I have my jars and they've been simmering for about 5 minutes. I also, previous to starting, simmered my measuring cup for about 5 minutes because I want to make sure it's nice and sterile. Make sure though that your measuring cup will handle the heat. I'm going to use the measuring cup to pour and fill the jars. So whatever you're using to do that, you want to make sure is sterile as well. So now I've turned the heat off and I just want to get my jars out of here. I have a great little jar tongs, but if you don't, just use regular tongs. So I'm just going to stand it up, gently pour the water out, and you want to be really careful to not touch any part of the inside of the jar now. Now that it's been sterilized, you don't want anything to get inside. Stand up the next one. And now with the water that was simmering, I've turned the heat off, so make sure there's no more heat, okay? You're gonna place the lids. You're only going to do this once your apple butter is ready to go, and you want the lids to sit in here for about 3 minutes. 3 to 5. You don't want it to sit too long, but you need the wax seal inside to warm up. You also don't want to boil this because you'll damage the seal. So you want it in boiled water, but you don't want it boiling. So make sure the heat is completely off. Pop your lids in. And then we've got our measuring cup here. So I'm going to fill that with our apple butter. This is still hot, so if your apple butter is cooled off, make sure you warm it up again. And food safety is super, super critical when canning food. So you want to make sure that all of your temperatures are right and that everything's ready to go. So I have my sterilized measuring cup And now I'm just going to fill the jars just almost to the neck. So hot apple butter, hot jar. While I'm doing that, my lids are getting ready. Obviously a funnel would be a better choice, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to pour. Looks like I'm going to get 2 jars today, but you might get 3. You just want to clean up the edge if you have any apple butter that got around the outside. So I have just a touch there, but my hands are clean. I'm wearing gloves. Now that our lids have been sitting for a couple minutes, you just want to take them one at a time. And remember, don't touch the inside of the lid with your fingers, so just the outside. Now I'm going to put the lid on, and I want to twist it just until it's tight to my fingers. Don't wrench on it. You want it to seal, but you don't want to wreck the seal. So nice and tight with your fingers. And then we're going to put this back into some simmering water, and we're going to simmer it for somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Because we can't test the temperature at home, I'm going to recommend that you keep these in the fridge. And you'll notice that my lids are popping up. So I'm just going to cover that up with a little bit more water. Make sure they're completely covered. And then I'm going to simmer them for 20 to 30 minutes. Likely they're shelf stable, but because we can't test the temperature inside the jar, we're going to recommend you keep it in the fridge. Okay, so top it up with a little bit of water, set your timer, 20 to 30 minutes, and then you can remove the jars and they're done.